Excellent. So this is, Milos. And he has a background, obviously, in engineering, as I said, banking, retail, hospitality, and healthcare. So a nice, diverse skill set to bring to the Smartpay mix. Very next along the line is Rosie Nathan, who will be known to many of you. She, unlike most of the other panel, is not an engineer.
No.
So we're going to direct all of our technical questions at Rosie. Rosie is with Payment Express, but she comes from a background having worked with financial services around reporting, so from Freedom originally, and also work in the legal and accounting sector, which sounds awfully
riveting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And before that, logistics like freight forwarding and things like that. So a very diverse background. And Rosie's in a corporate relationship role for Payment Express. She makes all of the big problems go away. So I hear. And last on the list we have John Pinkerton. So John also is a engineering background, and he's got quite a diverse history himself. Currently doing a lot of work with MYPINPAD, and we'll talk a little about that in the technology, but he brings obviously experience around cards and payments that is also very deep and pretty broad as well. So, as I said, we're going to start with a little bit of a top of mind from each of the panellists, and then we'll get into some questions. So why don't we start, John, with you?
Yeah, good afternoon. So top of mind, I think, as the topic's going to progress into, is we're reaching a point where the consumers have been empowered, and now the platforms know how to leverage that empowerment, leverage that change, and demand change. So we're coming to that point where the platforms recognise what they can do, what they can demand, and they're not waiting for permission.
Excellent, thank you. Rosie?
Great. Hi, everybody. So for me, I think it's just continuing on from the themes of this morning, really. There's a lot that we are learning from our merchants and from consumers, and marrying this whole relationship of making a frictionless, enabling consumers to purchase what they want to purchase, where they want to purchase, and allowing merchants to do that in a low-effort way to impact their own businesses as well. So looking forward to exploring that further.
Thank you.
Cool. I think there's some short-term benefits and long-term direction that we'll go into. Long-term, you've all probably seen things like the Amazon Go store or things done by Alibaba in China, but there's also some low-hanging fruit that merchants can make use of pretty much immediately. So I'm looking forward to diving deeper into that.
Excellent. And Rick?
Okay, I wanted to, I've just come back after 10 years in the UK. I wanted to bring some kind of real-life success stories and some war stories, actually, as to what open platforms really mean, and particularly in the case of customer experience, and also importantly on the other side in terms of merchant experience. So we really have two customers who are trying to join up here. So
excellent.
I look forward to that.
And that is a perfect segue into the first part of what we're going to talk about on the panel, which is where the checkout experience and the retail experience has gone in the last few years and where it's coming. So Rick, why don't we start with you in terms of that evolution? What are some of the examples that you've seen that really stand out to you? Okay,
sure. So one of the industries that certainly has changed a lot in the UK in the last 10, 15 years is in the realms of online travel. So certainly having come back here, I've noticed that travel has moved on quite a lot, but certainly not as much as what happened in the UK about 10, 12 years ago. So back then, a new market was opened up, a market called dynamic packaging, which you may or may not have heard of. So essentially it enabled you as a consumer to package your own holiday on the fly online. And clearly as a result of that, each holiday had a number of other merchants underneath it. So airline, hotel, taxi service, other add-ons you might want, all suppliers needed to be paid at some point in time. I have no mic. However, on the front end, you wanted to take payment for that as part of the checkout. So a lot of these guys launched, so people like Travel Republic, some pretty big brands that didn't exist 10 years ago that are now leading the dominating the UK travel market. Payments were clearly a big part of that. These companies were able to take payment through card, credit, debit, and that's now evolved into what we see here, which is buy now, pay later. However, on the way, some of these guys went bust, seriously broke, because there weren't the right, so the APIs were there, the ability to take payment from consumers were there, but the regulator, both travel market and also the payment market, hadn't kept up. So I don't know if anyone's aware, but 4 or 5 years ago, 2 or 3 of these startups essentially ended up with 250,000 people stuck in Europe, having taken their holiday with no recourse to the people who actually sold the holiday. So it's a combination of not just payments, but also the actual travel industry as a vertical in itself that didn't keep up. So the actual travel industry was enabled through APIs, through airline APIs, hotel APIs, payment APIs, but then the regulation of all of that didn't keep up. So it's a war story that I bring up quite a lot as to keep up.
Right, and it's actually both, isn't it? Because it's the innovation story which creates the opportunity, but then where are the checks and balances that make sure that people aren't, 250,000 people aren't left in Europe. John, you've probably come on a similar journey in terms of seeing quite a bit of innovation develop over time, and indeed what you're doing now would be classed probably as an evolution in terms of POS. What are your thoughts on where things have come from?
Yes, so I can sort of share the MYPINPAD journey. So MYPINPAD, if you don't know what it is a technology that protects the input into a touchscreen device. So, and that started out, you can put your PIN in a normal device rather than having a specialised payment terminal. And about 3 or 4 years ago when I joined MYPINPAD, basically PCI said, no way, it's never going to happen. You need a special bit of hardware to make that happen. And a lot of long conversations and a lot of naysayers basically changed their mind. And that wasn't because they were wrong or we were right. It was because of the consumers realised the benefit. And when I mean consumers, I mean the merchants and the end users realised the benefit of having a solution on a COTS device, a device that you can get off the shelf, lower the costs of providing acceptance into a market, but also utilise the new software security standards, the new approaches to security and the new approaches to risk to be able to create more acceptance points. And by creating these acceptance points on a COTS device, a mobile device or a tablet, you also remove the single form factor payment type solution. So it's no longer a cards payment terminal, it's a smart device that allows you to appify some of your consumer experiences. It allows you to continue to accept card payments with a dongle, perhaps in the very near future using the built-in NFC aerial itself. But it also gives merchants that opportunity to create bespoke experiences, use their experience with the customer interactions.
Cool. That's interesting. I didn't realise the future-looking aspect of that as well that you're talking about. So that's a very good takeout. I guess if I can come from that and talking about the COTS, the consumer device, and maybe Milos, your business was built on terminals, right? So I guess a couple of aspects of this. What's your response to the likes of the MYPINPAD, but also what innovation are you seeing and you bringing to the market as well?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a little bit going back into history. Like if you ask people 20, 30 years ago, what do they expect of today? They'd say we expect flying cars and Skynet, but the reality is we have no credit stickers on terminals. But when I said in the beginning that there's definitely low-hanging fruit that merchants can make use of in order to have a better customer experience in their stores, then that's definitely something that's available right now, both in New Zealand and overseas, and Smartpay as a company is also contributing to that. So it's things like not having big and heavy point-of-sale machines and terminals. It's mobile devices, it's cloud-based solutions, it's API-driven solutions. Like not having a checkout line at the front of the store, like having people with terminals walking around the store and with iPads or any other tablets and taking payments. So that's kind of the things that are available already. We at Smartpay have different solutions to accommodate for all of those needs. And I guess the more competition, the better. Things like pin on glass, etc., are also a good addition to the industry. What we're also seeing as a trend is not really moving away from cards, but also bringing those additional ways of payments into the mix. Mobile wallets, things like Apple Pay, QR payments, which is where Smartpay's focus has been really strong recently. So those are all the things that I think will make a big impact right now and in the next few years.
Excellent, thank you. And again, that's illuminating, especially from, I mean, if I think about my experience with Smartpay, start off thinking about a terminal company, but you're not a terminal company anymore.
Yeah,
that's not what you're doing.
We've evolved quite greatly in the last few years. Yeah.
Which, again, there's a nice segue here to Rosie, because if you characterise the origins of Payment Express, back in its direct payment DPS days, it was primarily, well, it was an e-commerce company which had some terminal capability, and obviously you have evolved since those days as well, probably slightly the other direction, so starting off more in the online world and merging with the retail. So given that context, I guess taken from your perspective, what's your view in terms of that evolution?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard a lot of the history working at DPS and getting involved in some projects with some long-term customers of ours. I've been with Payment Express now for 1.5 years, but as you earlier mentioned, I'm involved in enterprise and government sales, so it puts me in contact with a number of larger scale merchants and government departments, and I think it's kind of taking it a step back, as we were talking about earlier this morning. So what are the options we want to provide to those people that wish to pay our customers, and how can we make that an easy transition for them? So I suppose our evolution has really been around a singular focus of ensuring that we give our customers the mechanisms to provide their customers with something that's as frictionless as possible. So we've taken a complete omni-channel view. So we have the ability to, provide our customers with a view that they necessarily wouldn't get from anywhere else. So having their customers present or purchase online and then come in store and understand who they are. So this is an important piece around that loyalty. If I go in and shop with an organisation, I don't want them to now find me anonymous once I walk into their retail outlet. And I think that's part of the challenge that we're facing in terms of that future evolution. I want to, as a consumer personally, and certainly the feedback that I get from my larger merchants, they want to remove those barriers so that they can cut out the white noise, whether that's marketing or loyalty or just really what aligns to any of their customers, and get a bit of view. So this comes back to everything we were speaking this morning around trust and identity. So that's kind of really where our focus is in supporting that.
You brought up a term which has been bandied around quite a bit in this area, which is omni-channel. Probably less so now than it has been in the past, because it has evolved even from the original definition. And you touched on, just as you were explaining it, the loyalty aspects, the identity aspects, the trust aspects, which sort of go with that. I just wonder, in picking up on that point, perhaps John, what's your view on that sort of omni-channel, the blurred lines, the integration that's happening?
Yeah, so I kind of think that the thing online, offline, or in-store e-commerce thing was something that basically payments people invented. It was, there was obviously the technology had to catch up, but the concept of two different things, like when I interact with, let's say, a supermarket brand, Pete's at the background, so let's say go to New World. If I do something online, I want the same quality product as I do in store, and that differentiation is only something that I think payments people invented so that you have different fee structures in your interchange. Whereas, and I think early on in the days, it might have been acceptable because technology, and we didn't have a whole lot of e-commerce sites. We were playing catch up, and we were quite forgiving. We said to these big industries, okay, we'll give you a couple of experiences before I say the experience is not suitable, that I didn't like the experience. But now it's not blurred, it's just that we are now our expectations a lot higher. The technology's been around for a long time. Why can't you give me what I want? Because if I go in store and you're nice to me, you smile, you recognise me, everything I want to buy is there and available. Why can't you do that online? So I don't think there was a blurred line. I think it's just our expectations have changed to have a consistent experience across all our platforms and to be treated as one across those platforms.
Okay, excellent. Milos, what's Smartpay's journey been here?
Well, Smartpay has mostly been focused on the offline aspects, so that in-store experience for merchants. That's where most of our products sit. But having said that, as I mentioned before, we do have a set of APIs that allows apps and point-of-sale systems and other types of software to integrate into that experience and provide a common platform. And I think another thing that I've noticed is that people, and I do this myself as well, people go offline and they browse things, and then they go online and they shop for the best deal. So the concept of brick and mortar stores is still going to remain for quite a while going forward, and even e-commerce giants like Amazon are opening offline stores as well.
Brick, I'm sure you've seen quite a few examples and probably worked in developing some solutions in the space as well.
Yeah, so a good cue to take here from the UK is in the performance marketing kind of industry. So particularly going from online to offline. So where there are campaigns which are surfaced in an online channel. And that could be mobile, could be native app, it could be browser-based, and then you want to go and look at the product further in store and potentially even redeem a particular offer in store. There's a word in performance marketing called attribution, which equals everything, and so it's clearly closely related to payment. And in the UK, there's an entire industry around what are called affiliate networks, which I've noticed there's certainly a small one here, but they don't really exist. Around actually taking a campaign from a brand or a retailer and then using some form of token, or it could actually be a payment method, to track the performance of that campaign all the way through to either online or, more often than not, online to in-store checkout. So those technologies are evolving, and the big GAFA players are leading the charge in terms of clearly that's how they monetize their traffic.
It's okay. So neither of your lapels are working well, so share the microphone as we go. But that's okay.
We have to share.
Yeah, we have to share. We all share. We're all nice people. Transitioning on, so we've talked a lot about, I guess, the possibilities that are in the marketplace, both in terms of the customer demand, as well as some of the innovative solutions which are in play, and obviously some smart people around the place who are putting it all together for us. One of the questions which has arisen in this is, how much is this niche, and how much is this one size fits all? So I'd like to get your impressions on that. John, you touched on it just before, so maybe if you can expand on those thoughts.
So I think most things start out niche, right? Unless some big company with distribution networks already wants to roll it out to everyone. So technologies such as Pin on Cots or Spock, that's going to start out niche, but a lot of the bigger companies, even terminal manufacturers, like a traditional terminal manufacturers, have realised that what it brings is actually a solution for all of market. And it was kind of a precedence, SPOC, which is software pin on COTS device, is a precedent where PCI said no, never going to happen, and then actually players proved that it was possible. And now I think you have a look at some of the feedback. So the feedback is we don't want to have a card reader anymore. So why can't we use the NFC built into the device? And the language from these compliance companies are no longer no, it's never going to happen. Is let's work out how it best happens. So so when you get to that kind of removing, I guess, bespoke or specialised hardware to being able to accept payments on any device, it goes from being a niche to what are the possibilities, and where is it best fitting.
Cool, thank you. Rick, you've probably seen this as well in terms of your work, especially in London, and probably here to an extent as well, of that play. And I guess you reflected on it in your opening, was like there's some cool stories, but there's also some war stories. What lessons would you suggest out of this?
Well, I think you're talking about platformification in a way, in terms of just making the authentication or step-up authentication just another feature of, in a way, an API, and just a way to actually deploy an experience when you design that on top. I think certainly in the hospitality industry in London, there are a range of new fintechs who are deploying solutions pretty much in partnership with the likes of, I don't know who's used OpenTable here, or others, which are kind of stood up initially as a booking type platform, but then they're getting more and more ingrained into, now they actually run the entire restaurant, including the POS, including taking payment, and so they're seeing the end-to-end value chain as a platform just for the restaurant hospitality industry. So certainly when you want to go and stand up a restaurant, the costs of doing that, there are now a lot of pop-up restaurants in London who might only open a site for 3 or 4 weeks, and they'd stand up an entire site, including their infrastructure, menu, taking payments, all those different things, because it's now available via a platform and it's click and drag and they can do it. So certainly seeing that. Okay, so plenty of opportunity.
In terms of barriers, and I'm going to go to Rosie with this one to start with. See what you say. So we've got a bunch of innovators and really fintechs sitting up here. These are the people who are making the solutions happening and providing the glue between the customers and the retailers, and ultimately the banks have a role to play in that as well. So here's your opportunity. What is stopping you? What are the barriers in your way, remembering that you're in a room full of bankers mainly? What can the industry do to help you do your job better?
Yeah, I think in New Zealand, so we have been a very forward-thinking payments industry, and we've got a history of that. But we've already displayed earlier this morning around when there is no historical infrastructure, the types of leaps and bounds that can be made around the area of payments. So we probably sit in a nice sweet spot middle zone there, where we have some agility, we have flexibility, we have a number of innovators, and we embrace that. I don't really think there's a lot of limits. It's more around what the possibility is to enable the overall experience that our merchants want to provide to their shoppers. So it's a twofold question. Quite often payments gets left as the last consideration in that whole experience, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but we do have to make sure that it still works. It's important that our merchants are able to get paid. But I think really we have a lot of very smart and very able and very keen people within our industry that are wanting to see the best of payments globally take form here in New Zealand. So it's just how do we get those out and into the hands of merchants and not create too much noise around that, and present it to their consumers in the way they want to best absorb it.
Okay, thank you. It was reasonably non-controversial. There was an opportunity inherent in that. Yeah, John's itching. We'll just hold your horses. Milos, what are your thoughts on that in terms of what can the banks do to help you do your job better?
Well, we don't work directly with the banks at Smartpay. We're mostly working with the switches. So
Okay. All the switches.
Mostly, yeah. And as Rosie said, we're not really looking too much at the limits. We're more looking at the opportunities, and the opportunities are quite big. So more APIs, more integrations, that's definitely a big opportunity. You also mentioned at the beginning, one size fits all. We're not trying to have a one-size-fits-all solution. We have terminals of different sizes, but we are trying to. We do see a trend, and we are trying to get as many payment acceptance methods in one device. We have seen that our merchants prefer that, and it's not really a wide variety of payment methods. I actually can group them in two major types, so the card payments and the emerging mobile payments and QR payments especially. And it's popular now due to the large numbers of tourists especially, coming from China mostly. But it's just a matter of time before that trend goes to the rest of the world as well.
Cool. Okay, thanks. Rick, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, you are working somewhat with some of the banks in the accelerator mode.
So I guess open banking's only gone live in the UK in January this year. And I think the last number I saw, which is probably increased now, was I think 6 fintechs kind of part of either an AISP or a PISP as part of that. So the UK fintech industry and the payments evolution certainly moved from 2006, 7, 8 through to pre-January this year, and evolved a hell of a lot and delivered a lot of innovation and value without open banking. So in part, I think there's some rewiring around payment initiation to direct to account, and clearly there's some things to do there. However, debit in the UK is widely used, and debit in the UK is not ad valorem or percentage based per transaction. It's fixed fee per transaction, and it's been like that for a long time now. So I think certainly the price element is not going to be a major reason why we would adopt open banking or with the banks here. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be experiences, both mainly for customer side, but certainly for merchant adoption. Merchants aren't going to adopt it if it results in back-end noise for not enough gain, or if if you're a major merchant, there's a major question on fraud. So we've not really mentioned the F word too much, but certainly in the UK that's a major consideration.
Cool. Okay. So, John, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it over, sprinkle your fairy dust over the bankers in the room, what would happen?
Yeah, I guess it's just change the order which you evaluate whether you want to do something. So a lot of the conversations, and not just in New Zealand but around the world, start with you tell them what a solution is, and then they tell you all the reasons why it won't work. And 9 out of 10 of those reasons are around compliance, and using compliance as a reason not to listen to the consumer. So what would I change? I would say you need to be the voice of the consumer, and you need to have consumer-centric driven innovation. And start with, this is what they want. Then, can it be real? And then, how do you make it compliant? It's not compliant, we can't make it real, but they want it, so what do we do?